Upsets involving some of the biggest names in the US LBM Coaches Poll should lead to a major shakeup near the top of this week's top 25. In the top 10, there were not one, not two, not three, but four teams that fell on a Saturday that appeared mundane before games kicked off. Number 2, Alabama lost to Vanderbilt. Number 4, Tennessee lost at Arkansas. Number 9, Missouri was blown out by number 21, Texas A&M. Number 10, Michigan lost at Washington. About the only sure thing in this week's poll, set to be released around noon on Sunday, is that Texas will remain number 1. The Longhorns were off on Saturday, heading into next weekend's rivalry game against number 17 Oklahoma. Where things go from there is almost anyone's guess. Here's our best estimate for how the top 10 will look when the new poll is released. Texas, 5-0. After splitting first-place votes with Alabama, the Longhorns will be the no-doubt number 1. Texas has looked like the nation's best team, but it can't afford to take Oklahoma lightly despite the Sooners' struggles in the transition to the SEC. Ohio State, 5-0. The Buckeyes passed an early test against Iowa after a slow start with 2 first-half turnovers and another turnover on downs. But things changed after the Buckeyes began to lean on an incredible receiver corps headed by veteran Emeka Egbuka and freshman standout Jeremiah Smith. In the 35-7 win, Egbuka scored 3 times. Georgia, 4-1. The loss to Alabama looks a little worse, though that's not a big deal down the line for Georgia's playoff hopes. The big question in this week's poll is how voters handle the comparison between the Bulldogs and Crimson Tide. In the end, Alabama won the head-to-head game but lost to Vanderbilt, and only the second part is impossible to ignore. Oregon, 5-0. The Ducks had no problems against Michigan State, and they stayed on track for an unbeaten matchup against Ohio State this coming Saturday. A win there wouldn't necessarily push Oregon to number 1 in the poll, but you could easily see the Ducks rising to number 2 and replacing the Buckeyes as the top-ranked team in the Big Ten. You might even see the Ducks leap ahead of Georgia to land at number 3, but that 3-spot jump after beating the Spartans might be overgenerous. Penn State, 5-0. The Nittany Lions haven't put together complete 60-minute games in recent wins against Illinois and UCLA, playing both opponents tight for the first half before eventually pulling away in the second. That's a concern for the game against Ohio State in early November, for example. But Penn State continues to look like one of the surest bets for an at-large playoff bid. Miami, 6-0. Miami's ridiculous comeback in California keeps the Hurricanes among the few unbeaten Power 4 teams still standing and the top-ranked team from the ACC. Miami deserves credit for surviving this road test on a Saturday when most major contenders were being pushed as favorites. 4-1. That the Tide won't fall out of the top 10 can be attributed entirely to that win against Georgia. There are some other wins that look good, including a road victory against Wisconsin. But the truth is that the Tide get by on 2 things: the win last Saturday and the fact that they're, Alabama. Tennessee, 4-1. Losing 19-14 at Arkansas is remarkable, given how Tennessee had looked like a borderline juggernaut in September. It goes to show how rocky things will be in the deepest SEC in conference history. There are issues that have to be addressed coming out of the weekend, but you only need to look back on last month to see how good the Volunteers can be. Mississippi, 5-1. After getting knocked from the ranks of unbeaten teams last Saturday with a 20-17 loss to Kentucky, the Rebels should hop back into the top 10 after an effortless win at South Carolina. While there's something about this team that's difficult to predict, it's clear the Rebels can play with and beat almost anyone when on their game. LSU, 4-1. LSU was number 12 in last week's poll and seems likely to get a slight bump into the top 10 heading into a crucial game against Ole Miss. The Tigers have been a little hit or miss, even when not including a loss to Southern California in the season opener, but they've won 4 in a row and are one of just 3 teams still unbeaten in SEC play.